Beck, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. I'm going to apologize. I had intended to be there in person. Had some other things come up, so I guess we've got this technology that allows us to actually be in two places at one time. So I feel fortunate about that. So hopefully you'll be able to see my slides. I'm going to keep this really informal. If you have questions, just go ahead and blurt them out. If you and hopefully we can work through some examples or use some of your own questions to show how we can balance some of these supplements for this winter, because it is going to be challenging. How many of y'all have priced cubes or cow supplements for this winter?
Yeah.
It's a little bit scary, isn't it? We have one person that's even looked. What have you looked at as far as pricing?
'20s and 38s, or 28s and 38s.
Yeah, and how much more is it this year than it probably would have been last year? Or
It's quite a bit, but I can't remember what it was last year. $100 a ton. There we go.
yep. Yeah, just about anything you buy. If it's $10 a sack or less, they may be putting some cheaper commodities in there to balance it, because if you're buying by the sack, everything's higher. And whenever you if you go to the mill here in Stillwater, they're selling out a 14 creep, which a lot of people use to wean their calves on, and some of that. So it's hard for the mills to keep commodities in, and it's hard to find a good value on supplements for this winter. So that's kind of how I'm going to approach talking about winter feeding. Here's some hay we had in storage. Hopefully you can see this picture from your screen. I don't remember how big that screen is. These, usually I look at the shape of the round bales. If it's a really nice cylinder shaped bale, they're probably not all that good a quality, because if you look at a really nice crabgrass bale or a really good ryegrass bale that you made, a lot of times by the time you go to pick those up out of the field, they're already squatting down. That's because there's not as much fiber as there would be in a mature Bermuda grass bale or a prairie hay bale. And those lower quality hays, they're just fiber, and there's not a lot of breakdown, and it's just I use the example of the Israelites in Egypt. Whenever the Pharaoh wanted to make it harder on them to make bricks, they took away the straw. Well, that straw is the fiber that binds the bricks together, and that's kind of how it goes with bales. And whenever you look at cows' fecal pats, if they're stacking up really tall or stacking up like quarters, there's a lot of fiber. It's not very digestible, and there's not a lot of protein. So this hay also is pretty coarse stemmed, and looks like it's got pretty long stems to it. Just looking at these bales, anybody got a guess as what kind of quality it would be?
8%.
8%. What?
Crude protein or digestible protein.
8% crude protein.
Yeah.
And, whenever it's that low in protein, we're looking at probably, maybe 50, 52% TDN or 52% digestibility. And I've been using this picture for several years because it is kind of an example of, hay that looks like it wouldn't be that high a quality. So then I went back and sourced out when I took the picture, the section of the barn, and where that field was. And this is where we had stacked our grinding hay for weaning calves. And this is actually a combination of millet and crabgrass, and it's 14% crude protein and right at 60% TDN. So it's one of the better hay crops that we were able to put together at that research facility. So the point in doing that is, if I'm just looking at this, I'm going to say that's low quality hay. And it's going to be harder to get cattle to eat it and that kind of thing. So, what's the difference in hay quality? Here's where we were feeding some heifer calves, some other crabgrass hay. It had been fertilized. It was cut at about 35 days cutting interval. It was 14% crude protein and 64% digestibility. So this is, something that, you can tell these cattle are not sorting any of it. They're consuming the entire bale, and they're getting a lot of utilization out of this. And this is some replacement heifers I was looking at on a farm visit. This was in another field on the same farm where it's an unmanaged hay meadow. It was kind of one of those deals where you get given to it by your neighbor kind of thing. There is some Bermuda grass in there, a lot of sage grass, and it's just cut one time a year with no fertility, and it has been cut, talking to this producer, for many years without adding anything back to it. So, there's no phosphorus being put down, no potassium. So they're losing their Bermuda grass stand, and it's going to, weeds and sage grass. So when we analyzed it, it's right at that. And this is what I was kind of expecting whenever I looked up this is what those bales I showed you in the barn, kind of look like. So, 9% crude protein and 50% TDN. They're sorting a lot out of it. And whenever you see cows sorting a lot more on a bale of hay, that's also an indication of quality, because better quality hay, they don't sort near as much of it whenever you feed it in a ring. And this is where they'd kept it out there as long as they felt they could, and then pulled the hay ring out. So I'm going to estimate they only consumed about 2/3 of that bale, and maybe less whenever they fed this one. So really the only way you can tell what your hay quality is to feed it. I guess that's another way, but you really need to test your hay, especially with our economic conditions where, corn's high. That means all of our supplemental feeds are high. Whenever Daryl gave his presentation on the Ranchers Thursday, the only thing that looked like it was a decent value in the prices he was showing was wheat mince. It's about 18-19% crude protein, digestible fiber byproduct. So, a good product to feed if you can handle bulk ingredients and that kind of thing. Of course, whenever word gets out that one thing is at a bargain, it's not going to stay that way for very long. So, this is intern we had working with us, we were sampling hay as we were pulling it out of the field. You know, there are other types of hay probes, but you know, really the hardest part of it is the labor involved in getting out there and getting a decent sample with a hay probe. So we used to analyze a lot of producer samples where I had at the research station I had been in, and you know, just grabbing a grab sample of your hay, you know, some of the lowest quality samples that I, you know, ever analyzed was somebody's grab sample, because what you reach in then and grab is the most mature, the stemmiest, and that's what comes out whenever you just try to grab on the outside of the bale. So it's not representative of what's in the bale, and that's not going to represent what you have in that field. So, you know, the price for analyzing hay here at the lab is very reasonable, especially considering if you can find those hidden gems like that hay I showed you in the barn, that's going to be a lot higher in quality than what you expect. Or you can identify some hay that you think is good quality and it's not. Those two things will allow you to utilize that hay where it best fits when you're feeding your cows. And once we have that hay analysis, you know, we can look at the cattle you're feeding and come up with a plan and a supplementation program that fits, that's not going to cost you a lot. And that doesn't matter whether you're feeding a bulk commodity or a, you know, a liquid feed type supplement, or you're utilizing some sort of complementary forage system, which I think has a lot of potential this year if we can get some you know, even short wheat pasture on cows can work really well. Here's where we're limit grazing some cows through the winter. These are spring calving cows. We'd let these cows onto these paddocks about 2 days a week or 3 days a week, depending on, you know, how good the wheat was and how good the, you know, what the cow's requirements are. Right now is you can kind of tell that's right before or during calving, just looking at these cows. And you know, they're pretty fat, they're pretty fleshy, and we planted a 1/4 acre to 6/10 of it, or about a 1/4 acre per cow. And that would allow us to graze 2 to 3 days a week to meet those cows' supplementation requirements. We're not using it to feed the cows all the time. You know, we've got them fenced off. And if you do this, you can, you know, in 8 hours, 6 or 8 hours in those 2 or 3 days, they can consume a lot of wheat forage. You know, you've seen a cow when she gets out, you know, along the road or gets into your wheat field, they put their head down and they start grazing, you know, especially if they're coming off from a dry wintering program. We've done this where we were, you know, grazing stockpiled or standing dormant forage. We've done it on low quality hay and even moderate quality hay through calving, and it works really well, you know, even if you have some fairly short wheat pasture. So this is 1 year's worth of hay samples that we analyzed through my lab several years ago. We had 670 samples, and the average was 11% crude protein and 55% TDN. So whenever I talk to a producer about, you know, their winter feeding program, there's 2 things I ask: what type of hay and what's the hay quality. And if they've not tested, they always say it's about average. So if it's about average, that's fairly good quality hay. You know, it's not going to meet a cow's requirements for early lactation, but this will meet a cow's requirements when she's in late lactation for sure. And it won't take a huge amount of supplement. It won't break the bank when you're trying to feed that early lactation cow. A dry gestating cow will actually gain body condition on this quality hay if it's average. But then whenever you break it down into what the quality really is with the analysis, nearly a third of those samples would barely meet or not meet the nutrient requirements for a dry cow that's pregnant. And look at the range of protein on that, 3% crude protein up to 16% crude protein. And, you know, a lot of that, with that average of that group of about 9, kind of what you'd expect. You know, some of that may be sampling, some of it may be weeds in the wheat. You know, if we've got some legumes in a field, and we, you know, if you've ever had to rake alfalfa or clover hay a couple of times to, you know, get it, you know, after a rain, we break off all the leaves, and the leaves are where the quality is for alfalfa or clover. Well, protein in the stem is actually fairly good, but the digestibility may be really low. So we can have these offsets of real high crude protein and real low digestibility. So, you know, hay quality doesn't just mean the crude protein content. It also takes account into the fibers and what the digestibility is. The next group would be kind of the average quality. It was 10% crude protein and 53% TDN. You know, that's good enough for a dry pregnant cow. It's really close to meeting the late lactation cow's requirements. And then we get into the better quality hay, that 12% and 57% TDN. That's kind of what my target would be on trying to get our average from a farm to be. If we can get hay that's on the average of 12% crude protein and 57% digestibility, you know, we can really come up with a supplementation program that works. It's that all that really low quality hay that kind of drags down our average. It's kind of a challenge to use. And then, you know, that really top quality hay, you know, the fertilized Bermuda grass with the short cutting interval, those kind of things, you know, 14.6% crude protein and 60% TDN. That's going to meet a early lactations cow's nutrient requirements, and really not need any other supplement besides that hay. I'm going to answer a chat. So when we look at this, at least we know what we're working with. And, you know, if we have it stacked in such a way, we can access different types of hay at different times, don't have to transport it long distances and that kind of thing. we can, target our cow's nutrient requirements to the type of hay we're going to feed. So when we're looking at the nutrient requirements of beef cattle on the average, if they consume what we think they're going to consume, a dry cow only needs about 8% crude protein and 52% TDN. So, it's fairly easy to get that type of hay, for those cows. If we calve in the true spring calving season, if we are calving in March and April, it's really easy to get a cow through the winter, just on some fairly low quality hay. This is kind of what we expect from a nice prairie hay stand or even unmanaged Bermuda grass. We can hit these targets if we kind of even have a decent cutting interval on those. A lactating cow, this cow here is in the peak milk. Notice how much higher the consumption is. These cows, they can pack away a lot of feed. They've got a lot of metabolic pressure for milk production. And they have, that dry pregnant cow, there's a lot of her gut capacity that's taken up by that calf, especially when we get.
Hey, Dr. Beck? Hello? Oh, there we go.
Those cows that are in peak milk, unless we have, some sort of plan to get those cows easily through the winter, we need to kind of think about when we turn bulls in and when we pull cows out to meet, our environment and the type of hay we're going to produce. Or we're going to have to feed a lot of supplements to make those cows meet those requirements. It's really, really easy to come up with a supplementation program whenever you have decent quality hay, moderate, nutrient requirements, and, a kind of a closed calving season where those cattle will have similar nutrient requirements. What's hard is when those nutrient requirements are all over the place. We have dry pregnant cows, we have late lactation cows, and we have cows that are, in early lactation. And if we're going to feed a dry pregnant cow and a lactating, early lactating cow together, especially that early lactating cow, we're going to miss on one or the other. We're either going to get that dry pregnant cow way over fat, or we're going to way underfeed the lactating cow. So, if we have a year-round calving season and we're going to try to feed those cows through the winter, one of the best things you can do is sort your cows into feeding groups. Cows that haven't calved yet, you kind of put them together. Cows that have calves on the side, put them together. And then, you can at least target your feeding and supplementation to meet those. So, this year, our prospects on wheat pasture were fairly low. I don't know how many of y'all normally keep calves on wheat pasture that you went ahead and sold or are going to sell instead of putting them out. So how many of you have some kind of access to small grain pasture or wheat pasture in your area? So one of the programs that, and I already kind of touched on it, that actually works well and is going to be a lot cheaper, I think, than trying to buy supplements for these cows. Even if you have wheat pasture that's not big enough to turn calves out on, we wouldn't expect calves to grow very well. If we're looking at 700 or 800 pounds of forage dry matter per acre, which would be about 4 inches, just so long as it's pegged down with a good root system, we should be able to, during the, with the spring calving cow, turn a cow out 1 day a week for just a few hours, even with fairly low quality hay. You could make it through December or January, on that short wheat pasture, just doing 1 or 2 days a week with those cows. The nutrient requirements on those cows will come up when they calve later in the spring, and that's going to correspond with more forage growth on that wheat pasture. So then you can increase the days that those cows go out on wheat. We go up to 3 days a week for 6 to 8 hours and then up to 4 days a week for 6 to 8 hours. As that, gets closer into graze out, if you're going to quit grazing, for a dual purpose wheat crop, that normally happens in late February, early March. Then we can look at, having some interseeded ryegrass or something like that available. It's one thing to consider is it's not too late to go ahead and interseed some small grains into Bermuda grass. If we're really pushing for an early planting date, when we, cut in the small grains into Bermuda grass, that's when Bermuda grass will still be growing, in especially early October, late September, and it will, compete with your seedlings and kill your seedlings out. So, really mid-October is not too late, and it's actually kind of the right time to plant, some rye, triticale or ryegrass into some Bermuda grass, and that will, if we get it up, we get it fertilized, it will be available by, real late winter, that mid-February to mid-March, and that really corresponds well to the highest nutrient requirements of those cows. So, that's another thing to consider instead of trying to just utilize, supplements like we would every year, because, $100 a ton more is going to be an issue. Okay, my computer has started back up. It's thinking about doing something. I've got 1 more or 2 more slides I want to show, if I can get into back into the Zoom.
is there any questions? Mr. Lovelace chatted in. Ally, can you read that chat?
Yeah, he says his dry matter is 85.9%, and he has two groups, 1,100 to 1,200 pounds through late third trimester, 6 to 7-year-olds, 14 to 16 months, 650 to 850 pounds heifers, and they're on wheat pasture, Gallagher wheat pasture.
Okay, and what was the as-fed analysis on his hay?
Created protein 7.4 and TDN 47.4.
You said 47.4?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try to get back into the Zoom again, see if I can make that work. All right, I'm going to enter this into the calculator program and use it as an example. The great thing about these computers we've got at the university is they've got so much stuff that whenever you get in a hurry to start something, it just takes forever to get it started. So apologize for that. We're connecting to the Zoom. All right, there I am. I promise it's connect. It says it's connecting this time. So. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. Now I need to.
Oh, yeah. It works. This is
Oh, no. That never did start. You. Some of this like this text with those. Right? You know, Judd. Awesome. Good same last name. Both same too.
No.
That we know of.
Oh, you're still muted, Dr. Beck.
Here's the yield results from some small plot work we had done out in the county on some Tifton 85 Bermuda grass. We cut this every 4 weeks with 0 fertilizer, 50 pounds of actual nitrogen for each cutting, and we got 4 cuttings, so that'd be right at 200 pounds of fertilizer per acre, or 100 pounds of nitrogen fertilizer per acre. And we saw an increase in forage yield with, you know, each level of added nitrogen. You know, our best bang for the buck was right at there at the 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre, as you know, we always expect. But we still saw a pretty good efficient response whenever we put up to 400 pounds of nitrogen fertilizer per acre. Now this summer, you know, fertilizer was, we thought it was high, but it was actually cheaper than it is now, and it's going up about $100 a ton a week. So what we bought to put out on our early planted wheat pasture may have been you know, $680 a ton. 2 to 3 weeks later, it's now, you know, $850 a ton. So and you know, you start calling around pricing at co-ops, all this nitrogen fertilizer, the you know, who has a cheaper price just depends on when they bought that load of fertilizer. So whenever we looked at this, the 0 pounds of fertilizer, you know, it didn't cost nothing. You know, the baling cost, you know, the lower yields, you know, of course, this is cutting it every 4 weeks, no matter how much is out there. So, you know, there's a lot of baling costs that would be associated with very little amount of hay. But it was about 9% crude protein and 50% TDN. If we've got that analysis and we're feeding it to a lactating cow, it would require 11 pounds of 20% cubes per day to meet her requirements and make it where she wasn't losing a lot of weight. So that takes that cost per bale from $34 a ton up to $192 a ton when we include the supplement cost. And it costs, with that, you know, $34 a ton or $34 a bale, $64 a ton hay, and, you know, $400 a ton 20s, we're looking at about $3 per cow per day, compared to that fertilized Bermuda grass where it was cut every 4 weeks. You know, it was 13% crude protein and 62% TDN. That meets the cow's requirements, and the cost of feeding that cow is essentially just the cost of the hay. So it's, cost is about $74 a ton, figuring on 1,000-pound bale, and that's just about a $1.10 a day per cow. When we put out a lot more fertilizer, we do get more yield, but and the price per bale is about the same, but we only increase that nutrient content of the hay just a little bit, going from 13 up to about 15% crude protein. And the way nitrogen fertilizer works, it's like an implant on a calf or something. It just decreases the maturity per day of age. So, it's putting on less fiber and growing more digestible energy, when we fertilize than when we don't. So, when we start looking at if all we're going to be feeding is a lactating cow, and we don't have a real good use for this low quality hay, it makes that low quality hay really expensive. The good thing is, if we have a pretty good consolidated calving season, or we can split cows up into feeding groups, we don't have to feed our lowest quality hay to our highest nutrient requirement animals. And also, this makes a good case for trying to fit our calving season to our environment and make it to where we're doing everything that we can on grass that's actually growing. And whether that's using complementary forages like cool season annuals, that really helps instead of feeding a lot of concentrate. Question?
Yeah, I've got a question. That 50 pounds an acre nitrogen to the 100 pounds of nitrogen, we gain a little bit better hay. Where does the rest of that nitrogen go? Does it stay in the ground? Does it for next year maybe, or does it?
Well, so we're going from about 7,800 pounds of yield at that 50 unit rate up to close to 10,000. So, if we look at I did remember the math at one point, but I don't remember it now. So that 15.6 crude protein is 2.5 pounds of nitrogen in the hay. Take that times 10,000. So that's 25,000 pounds of nitrogen. So, it's not all from the fertilizer, but if we look at, but that's 400 pounds of actual nitrogen being applied. This other, that's that 13% crude protein hay, that's about 2% nitrogen. So that's 16,000 pounds of nitrogen coming off, from that field. So there's, a lot of protein leaving with that extra hay. And it's not, like when we put out zero fertilizer, there's still protein in that hay. So, it's not all coming from the fertilizer. We're mining some nitrogen from the soil, and there's, natural accretion of nitrogen. But as we go you know, just looking at the slope on that line, we're not as efficient in fertilizer use. So, you know, it's not all getting that we're putting out, it's not all getting incorporated into the hay. So yes, part of that will go towards producing more yield and, you know, the higher quality hay. The rest of it either can be lost as ammonia, can stay in the soil once it gets mineralized, and will be available next year. So, you know, I guess to answer your question is yes, some of that will stay in for next year, but not all of it will.
Thank you.
So I've said all of this in my summary. This year, if we do anything, let's test our hay. Let's sort our cows by stage of production into feeding groups, and then use lowest quality hay for cows with the lowest requirements. If we've got some really bad hay, the best luck I've had using that when we have cows, especially with high nitrogen requirements, is to use that with that limit grazing cool season annuals. If we start trying to supplement our way through that, it gets really expensive and doesn't seem to work as well. So I'm going to try to open my calculator program again and go through Mr. Lovelace's example here real quick. Try to get this. Get y'all out of here in a timely manner, because I know you have the rest of your day. So I'm assuming you can see my calculator cow management screen now, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So I've put in here a 1,150 pound cow with medium to low milk, you know, making 20 pounds of milk a day. I'll go in and enter his hay in here. So we've got this cow. We've chosen early lactation mature cow. His cows are late gestation dry. Well, by the time we get into next month, so when we look at this hay, these cows will consume about 25 pounds of as-fed hay a day. And that's going to exactly meet their protein requirements. And they're going to gain about 1 pound a day. Now, notice when we put in our initial weight at 1,150 pounds and our mature weight, 1,150 pounds. They're not going to, we're really not wanting that cow to gain weight or body condition. But they will be gaining weight because of the weight of the fetus. So we've incorporated the fetal tissue growth into this as far as the projected average daily gain. So right here, even if they're keeping the same body condition and the cow weighs the same, they're still going to gain about a pound a day just to maintain herself as that fetus grows. So this hay for those dry pregnant cows, they're going to gain about a pound a day, which is what the fetus is going to gain. And it's, meeting pretty much the protein and energy requirements of that cow. Now, when that cow calves, say in February and March, intake goes up, as I pointed out. They have more body capacity just to, take in gut fill, and they have that metabolic drive to consume more feed. With this hay alone, the protein is deficient, as you can see over here. The energy is deficient. It's going to lose about a ½ pound a day. Now, if those cows are fat and, we can stand to lose, some body condition, it's going to lose 1 body condition score in 162 days. So they're only in peak milk for about 30 to 40 days, that individual cow. So, she may lose up to about a half of a body condition score. If you can stand that and still get that condition back on her with green grass, or she's fat enough, she's going to breed, she won't get down below a 5 or 5.5, then, that may be okay. If we feed some cubes, 3 pounds of cubes, that gets close to meeting the crude protein needs of that cow, cuts that weight loss down, to about a ¼ pound a day. So would take nearly a year for that cow to lose, a full body condition score. So, if you can get those cows in good condition before they calve, it's going to be a lot easier to keep them in adequate condition before calving. Thank you, Mr. Lovelace, for that example. If you had any other specific questions on that, you can ask, or does anybody else have any questions on those? All right.
I have a question.
Okay.
Going back to the limit grazing, how often does a cow need, and for how long a period does a cow need to be on average wheat pasture to meet her requirements if the hay is really kind of just low to average quality? I mean, we're going to have a dry hay, but we're gonna dry her up with the dry hay. So how long do you be on wheat bag?
So, we were able to, keep decent condition on those cows. On, that average kind of quality hay, 10% protein, 55 TDN, about 2 days a week. And that was equivalent to feeding a 20% supplement. Now, when we put them out 2 days a week through the winter, on this, type of late gestation cow, they were out there about 6 to 8 hours a day. So, if you're, open the gate, let them on when you're leaving for work, or leaving to go do something else in the morning. And then if you come back just a few hours later, you see the cows all kind of bedded down, they've gotten all they want, so you can drive them back off. And that tended to work really well. I worked with a producer last year that had some cows on. This quarter section was about 120 acres of tall grass prairie, real good condition. There was a lot of, standing dormant, about 40 acres of wheat. This was used for graze out. So that's pretty low quality roughage for those cows. They were putting the cows out one day and then coming back the next day and getting them off. And they lost some condition. There was some of those cows that, got down to, probably 4.5 body condition. But as they started calving, and part of that was, they lost a lot of condition during that ice storm, and there was no access to wheat there in February. But in a graze out situation, whenever it starts getting ahead of them, the cows were just turned out on it full time, and by the time the bulls got turned in, they were back to really nice flesh and good condition. So that kind of gives us a good opportunity to put condition back on some thin cows too as well. But in the best case, I would look at doing it 2 to 3 hours, 2 to 3 days a week, about six or so hours a day. And that should be plenty.
Have you ever done any work with limit grazing calves on wheat? And can that be done? My situation is I use my wheat pasture to develop young bulls.
Yeah.
They waste a lot. If I could limit graze them, I could use those other days to limit graze cows, maybe.
Bill Phillips at Fort Reno had done it with some stalker calves. And when I was talking to him about it, he said the calves, more so than the cows, would just stand and bawl and not, eat the hay they had in that dry lot. And I don't know if it's that particular set of calves or what was going on, but the calves did not gain probably as well as what he was expecting they would. And it seems like I think they were doing that more often, probably 5 days a week, and I think that kind of disrupts some grazing behavior. So it might be worth looking at, but the one time that I know it's been tried, it didn't work all that well as far as the gain on those. cattle.
Any other questions? No. All right, Dr. Beck, I think that's all the questions they had.
Okay, I guess it's a bad sign anytime you have to apologize multiple times through a presentation, but sorry about the